Today we're interviewing Joanne Thomson. She is our featured artist for March 2025 edition. Welcome, Joanne. It's lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you too, Susan. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're very welcome. I first became aware of your work from the Heritage House publisher when
Mhm.
they sent us a press release about your new book, 300 Mason Jars. You work mainly in watercolor. I know you've also worked with acrylic, but what do you find most rewarding and maybe perhaps most challenging about working with watercolors?
I think watercolor is a very intimate medium, and it's more like a conversation versus a monologue. And so I really like the fact that watercolor does what watercolor does, and you have to learn what it does and ask it to do that. Because if you ask it to do something it doesn't want to do, it's like a cat, it will not do it. And so I find that I really like that aspect of watercolor. Now, when you get as many hours in as I have, which is probably 40,000 plus, you get to be pretty good at knowing what it will do and ask it to do that. So chances of having it be successful are better. But it's always a surprise. It's always a surprise. And as you get better, it's often a delight.
Mhm.
Wow. So yeah, I love the medium. I love the quietness of it, the contemplative nature of it, the ability to store 30 paintings
Mm.
like
That's a
this.
big one, yes, storage.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Your artwork often explores themes of nature, particularly botanical subjects. I'm wondering what draws you to this focus.
I'm quite an introvert. It doesn't always look like I'm an introvert because I do things in the public, but I find that going into nature, growing things is always a really excellent way for me to ground myself. So I've always had a huge interest in nature, wandered in nature, and that's actually part of the legacy of the Mason Jar book is this legacy of nature, of being in nature. And so I go out and then I make stories from it. I've got one right here. It's fireweed and thistle in mason
Mhm.
jars as part of the series. And fireweed is an invasive plant, or no, fireweed is a native plant, and
Mhm.
the thistle is an invasive plant. And so for me, I can create a story in here of basically our shadow natures and then our positive natures. So I always make I also anthropomorphize plants, I guess. So when I'm talking about them, I'm looking at them in terms of human life. So this one, for instance, this is maple blossoms in the spring. We have the big leaf maples on the island, and I just think they're just beautiful. And apparently you can eat them. But it's that emergence after the cold winter and how plants are so incredibly resilient that attracts me to them.
Teaching is a big part of your career. How
Mhm.
has your experience as an educator influenced your art making process?
Uh, hugely, it influences your art process because things that this series probably wouldn't have happened had I not been teaching. And that's because my students always wanted me to teach them how to paint glass. And I was never particularly interested in teaching or learning how to paint glass. And so when I was trying to come up with a series for my family history or something to represent my family history, I thought, well, while I'm waiting for something to inspire me, I'll start learning how to paint glass and satisfy my students. And then I found that glass became very fascinating. And I found that the mason jar became a vehicle for this series. And then through the process of doing it, I really learned how to paint glass. And yeah, because students ask questions. They'll say, well, I want to do this. I may never have thought of doing it, but in teaching a class, I think, how could you do that? And so then I will help them learn how to do that. So I've become very versatile as a result of having my students ask me to do things that I wouldn't normally do.
Now let's talk about your book, 300 Mason Jars. I found the book was a beautiful work of art
Mhm.
uh, from the design, layout, and the overall aesthetics. Um, as a graphic designing background, those are the things that attracted me most to it. The
Yeah.
size of it, everything of it was just absolutely perfect. And I'm so grateful for the Heritage House for introducing me to your work. With such a large scale project, how did you maintain the creative momentum and find fresh inspiration with each jar?
Well, each piece, as you are an artist yourself, no, each piece has a life of its own. And so I, the size of the project was massive, but I never thought about it as being massive. I just went one jar at a time because I think if I'd thought 300, I would never have started 300. I mean,
That's true.
I just started it and I thought, oh, I have no idea. Like I just, and now I look back on it and think, how did I do that? Like, how did I maintain momentum throughout it? And the momentum came and went. There was things that happened during the creation of the series. I broke my left wrist rather severely and had a lot of pain for a whole year. That held me back quite a bit. My mother passed away. That held me back. But my mother loved the series. She absolutely thought it was the best work I'd ever done. And after we got over a few things about my sharing family secrets, we got over that part. And then she realized she thought it was a beautiful series. And so when I really, when after she had passed and had recovered from that somewhat, I had a lot more artifacts that she had, which came to me. And so that's kind of what finished the series was all this richness of artifacts that I had and the additional family stories and things that came with that. And but it was, yeah, it was incremental. It was 5 years and it was incremental. I just as the plants came in season, like you say, I love botanicals. So
Mhm.
I would go out and I would find these plants and I would think, oh, that will fit in a jar. And I would put it in a jar and paint it. And so gradually the numbers came up. Once I hit 100, I thought, oh, I can do this. And then it just kept going from there. And if you look in the book, at the very back of the book, they put a chronological list of the paintings.
Mhm.
And the last 2 weeks are like, whoa, I was in studio like 24/7, like just
Yeah.
I just had this urge to just finish the book. And so some of the most precious paintings are in that last 2 weeks. Hmm.
Um, I find the book very interesting because it's also about your family heritage and how you combine the two. I'm just wondering how the two lined up. And I've never seen a book that is so unique for family heritage and the history and all that stuff. And putting the two together, was that just sort of happened, or was that the plan at the beginning, or?
It was yeah, it just kind of happened in that when I started doing the paintings of things in jars, it was I had transcribed some stories my grandmother had recorded by Fred Marshall, who now owns the property up in Kirk Creek.
Mhm.
And my grandmother was 80, he interviewed her and had tapes of them. And then he had the tapes put to CD. And he always wanted them transcribed. But I had gone to visit him and he'd sent me the CD and I transcribed it. And in one of those stories, she said she always had 300 mason jars on the go with stuff in them to feed the family. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just start putting things in mason jars. And once I put things in mason jars for a while, I realized that this was a vehicle to illustrate the family history because our family history is so fragmented, because my grandfather had taken his own life and nobody spoke about his contributions. So all I
Mhm.
had was the feminine contributions to the family history. And so it just became a vehicle. It wasn't until later on in the series, somebody says, oh, you're putting things in bottles again. And I thought, I'm putting things in bottles again? And I realized that I had done a series, a 20-year series in my 40s and 50s called Bottled Women. It
Mhm.
was very different. It was very abstract and primary colors and black backgrounds, but it was about putting things in vessels. So I think something about the vessel and how it can contain, but also distort what's inside it fascinated me from the start. And so that's now when students ask me, how do you paint glass? I said, you don't paint the glass. You paint the distortions glass causes. And then it looks like glass. Then you have to do a final, very thin wash to make the glass show up. But it's the distortions And for me, those distortions fit with history as well, because the distortions of the family stories as they get told also are part of this story. We don't know.
Mhm.
We'll never know exactly what happened 50 years ago. Even when we lived 50 years ago, we don't remember that accurately. It gets influenced by story and viewpoint. So
Well, and
that's
I find with my own family, I have a different vision of what happened. And then I
absolutely,
talk to my sister and she has something else, because of the age difference or whatever, right? Things
yeah,
that you remember. So there's also that. Now I have
yeah.
to ask you, Joanne, do you have 300 mason jars in your house?
I have at least 300. I haven't actually counted them, but I've got a lot of mason jars. I do a lot of canning and preserving myself. And I just moved actually recently. And I have no idea how many I have, but it's an awful lot of them. And I have a lot of beautiful old ones too, because, with this project, I saved, I went and found mason jars. Mason jars were given to me. And also, at the very start of this series, well, actually, it was in quite a ways into the series. My sister said, I've got those glass topped mason jars that were from Kerr Creek when Mum moved out of her place. And that was up in northern BC, and I wasn't there. She was going to throw them away, and my sister grabbed them. And so she gave them to me to use in the series. So the actual jars that were used in Kerr Creek are in this series, which was pretty special.
Yeah, it's pretty beautiful. Yeah. I'd like to thank Heritage House Publishing for believing in your vision,
Mhm.
and introducing me to you and your lovely work. Is there any advice you'd like to give other artists who are considering publishing a book of their own?
Spend the time to turn it into a book. And so for me, I had no idea how to do this. I was totally overwhelmed. Doing all the paintings was that what I did. Writing all the poetry was what I did. And my daughter Elizabeth was absolutely determined that this should be a book. And other friends said, you should publish a book. You should get it published or you should self-publish it. And I'm going, oh, it's just overwhelming, totally overwhelming. But my daughter has the skills. She can use InDesign like it's unbelievable. Watching her, it's like watching an air traffic controller as she's moving things around. It's amazing. And so she was determined. So actually, we got together probably over 3 or 4 years. Just, we would have 2 days here and 2 days there and 2 days there. And then she would send me a list of things that I needed to send her. And so we finally put it together the year before I sent it to the publishers, like the August before I sent it out to publishers. And and she was insistent that we do the whole book. So that would be what I suggest. Have the whole book ready. And when you send it in, they ask you for a chapter or two. You send that in, and if it intrigues them, they'll ask for the rest. And so that's what I was able to do because my daughter had insisted on it. She called it a proof of concept. That what we sent them it was a proof of concept. And then they took it, what she had done, and they changed it entirely, of course, to fit with their aesthetic. As you say, the book is just beautifully designed. They have a beautiful designer, and Laura Cordick was the editor who took me under her wing and had me pare down all my writings down to 1 pages, which was a lot of work. It's hard to get things tight, but it really works well. So I'm very proud of the writing, and the writing being that it's so tight fits with the poetry, which is also very tight because those poems are only 4 or 5 lines each for each painting. And so it was working with that publishing team and their choice of the cover and the designs, I think has really, really helped. And the size is a lovely size.
It's
It's
absolutely beautiful. It's
I
a
care.
beautiful book. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
everything, like, as a designer, illustrator, I just found it lovely. Everything is very lovely. And the fact that it was, 300 paintings and it took you 5 years, I believe,
Yes.
from,
Yeah.
yeah, that's absolutely amazing. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Um, do you have anything else you'd like to add to this?
Um, Yeah, I think that you should be congratulated. All the years you've spent doing the Island Arts Magazine. I mean, that's amazing. That's an amazing commitment to the art world and an amazing contribution that you make to getting this information out there. I've often picked up your books when I've been traveling and just enjoy them very much. So thank
Well,
you.
we are digital now. Do you know that?
Yes, I
You know?
did know that. Yes, you
Okay.
did tell me that. And
Yeah,
so,
we do digital ever since COVID, and
yeah.
it's because I keep running into artists like yourself, and I think, well, there's a story, there's a story. So my job's been pretty easy, actually.
Yeah, but now you get to travel the world now.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, Joanne. It's been lovely to meet you, and much
Very much.
success in your further endeavors with book signings and all the stuff you're going to do this summer.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
If you like our videos, hit the like button below and subscribe to our channel.